Welcome to the Parenting Roundabout podcast for the week of January 31st, 2022. I'm Nicole Erdix, and I'm here with Catherine Haleko.
Hello.
And Terry Morrow.
Hello.
Every week we chat about the things parents are talking about, complaining about, and obsessing about. This week we're complaining about loneliness and obsessing about wildlife encounters. We also take a couple of breaks for an entertainment discussion and a recommendation roundup. Today, we are talking about technology in the classroom and how it's helped and hurt. And so, Terry, you're the one that found this, so I'm going to throw this over to you.
Yeah.
Because this stems from an article that you read.
We discussed an article from this source last week also. I received a tip of the week from something called Character Lab. Angela Duckworth, who does the No Stupid Questions podcast, I think I get emails from her saying, here's this week's tip. And they're very interesting articles about parenting and school and research of various types. So this week, it was about laptops in the classroom. It's written by a researcher who did a study that said kids didn't remember stuff as well if they took notes on a laptop as they did when they were writing. And based on that research, a lot of schools banned laptops in classrooms. And he says it's really not a universal thing. They are better for some reasons and not as good in other reasons. And you shouldn't necessarily ban them. What you want is for them not to be mindlessly transcribing the lecture. But, the fact that laptops enable you to type really fast and just write down every single word without thinking about it is what the problem is. And that there are ways it can be useful.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
Sorry, I had to interrupt there.
Go ahead.
I have a huge issue with the way he approached that.
Yeah.
Because, if you're a teacher that is going to just sit there and have your student mindlessly, because that's what ends up happening. If you're just going to have your students sit there and take notes from a board,
yeah,
you can't tell me that's any better than a computer. Because it's just you're on autopilot.
Yes.
It's so ridiculous. Anyway.
Yeah. No, that is, I remember from my long ago student days, before there were laptops, children, and you had to write down the notes. I always remember there were systems that you could use that would help you to know how to write the notes effectively. And yet, usually by the end of the semester, I looked back on my notes and went, these are spectacularly unhelpful. I'm just going to wing it. You can't write fast enough to take down every word, but then you have to think about what's going to be important and how can I write it down? And then once you're thinking about how can I write this down more effectively, you're losing half of the lecture anyway. So, certainly copying stuff on boards when you're younger, it's always a problem. Note-taking is a problem. And I would have been very tempted to just my kids sometimes. In college, I think I recorded some lectures, but then you have to go back and listen to it, which is a time-consuming process.
But then you could do it at a pace that works for you.
You could, but probably you wouldn't. And probably you would, at the night before the exam, you would have, 20 hours of lectures to listen to. And you would say, I'm just going to wing it. Fortunately, I winged it well, but still, I never really came up with a satisfactory way to do it. I did a lot of doodling. This is a thing, children. When you had a notebook, you used to take your pen and draw pictures. You didn't watch Netflix quietly on your computer or play with your phone. You had to entertain yourself with a pen and notebook paper. It was rough.
See, I just think things like this, articles like this, are just so dangerous because it enables teachers who are already looking for an excuse to not use computers. It enables them to get rid of it rather than just being a little bit more creative, not even creative, being a little bit more mindful of how children actually learn, how people learn.
I think that's what he was arguing, that, just because he did a study where people took better notes by hand than by laptop, then people jump to the conclusion that, okay, we can't have laptops. And he's saying like, that's not what I meant, that, like you said, Nicole, there are definitely occasions where laptops are helpful for learning or for classroom use, and it's a matter of using them mindfully. So I think you guys actually agree. But yeah. I mean, I know like why
even put it out there? Like, why?
Well, I think if your job is to do research, then you do research and you put the research out there. And then, I don't know. What he says in this article is a lesson on how to find and evaluate information on the internet might be better when students have access to laptops. A lesson on algebraic expressions might not be. Students with certain disabilities may need a laptop. Other students might be unable to use one. If a lesson requires exact quotes, then laptops are ideal. If the goal is conceptual understanding, they can create a temptation for verbatim transcription, which is counterproductive. So, I think he's arguing for flexibility and, not saying absolutely do not use them, but also realizing that they're not always the perfect implement. Do kids, at what level do kids use laptops in classrooms now? Because they didn't when my kids were in school.
My kids have had either an iPad or a laptop since about 4th grade, I would say.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. They have Chromebooks.
My kids are old.
And I mean, obviously that changed during COVID too. I mean, then they were handing out Chromebooks to kindergartners, but that was a special circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you're doing remote learning, can you take notes on the laptop that you were using for your remote learning?
Well, I don't know that little kids are.
Yeah, well, that's
notes,
true. But older kids.
But, like we had, I think I might have mentioned this, but a couple of weeks ago, we had this situation in my son's school where there was like a security breach in the school's technology, and every single thing did not work. No email, no telephones, no copy machines, no, none of the Google Classroom, Schoology, Infinite Campus, all those things, which, side note, why do we have to have all those things? Like, why doesn't one thing do it? But anyway, every single thing was inaccessible. And they had to cancel school for 2 days because there was, no teachers could do anything. No kids could do anything. Like maybe my kids went to Montessori elementary school. They probably would have been able to have Montessori lessons. Yeah. But they closed they're like, we can't have school if there's no phones, it's a safety issue. But anyway, reliance on technology can bite you in the bum is what I'm saying.
Right.
So, but things like when I certainly remember when I was in college and taking like an art history class where it's all about memorizing stuff.
Yeah.
I just made lists and lists and lists by hand. And I think that's how I got through it, because I just studied the lists, and even if I didn't have the image in front of me, it helped me memorize all the other facts. And then I would have to just like know what the painting looked like in my head or whatever. Yeah. So I wonder, like, that's the kind of thing where taking notes by hand or studying by writing might be helpful. And I don't know if, kids who rely on laptops would ever do that. Right. I mean, so that's where it can fall apart.
Yeah.
They would probably use Quizlet. Right?
Yeah. True. Yeah. You could.
I used to sit and crochet in my college classes instead of taking notes.
And then you can just listen.
Yeah.
Like it depends on how you learn, but I don't think when you start to put out information, I just think it's really detrimental. Even if you're like, oh, I did this study, but I didn't mean it that way. Like when you start to put out information like that.
Well, I mean, there could be schools where they were saying everybody has to take notes on laptops and this is the way we do things. And it might be useful for somebody to say to them, hey, that's not always correct. And research gets misinterpreted all the time. I can see that there might be a positive outcome of that research to be able to say, hey, it doesn't work for everything. And for some kids, it works better than for other kids. And there should be, a variety of options available. Don't think that you can just pass out a laptop for everybody. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I mean, isn't it a fairly common, isn't this what researchers do? They research, they put out a study, somebody misinterprets it, they clarify, and then, I don't know, they get a paycheck. If that's your job, how can you just, I did research, but people might misinterpret this, so I'm not going to put it out. I don't know. I think that there's probably a lot of people who think laptops in the classroom is very bad. Those of us who grew up in the Stone Age, I mean, I'm sure, like to tisk at it. So, it seems a study of whether they are effective in helping kids learn is not out of line. But this whole thing is making me feel ancient because not only was I in classrooms before there were, computers, but my kids were before everybody was getting a laptop. Yeah. I bet everybody's getting a laptop now.
Mine didn't have them either.
Yeah, when my kids were at some point in their schooling, our district had a big push just to get computers in the building. So that was when they were at that phase where let's have computers in the library.
Yes, that's what it was like when I taught. It was like there was one room and there was all of these old computers, usually Macs. Half of them didn't work.
Yeah.
The kids didn't know how to sign on. It was everybody was tightly squeezed and jammed. Their chairs were banging against each other. It was just a nightmare.
Somebody would download porn and then there would be, all sorts of trouble.
Oh, and then heaven forbid if you left the room while the kids were on the computer, because
yes,
yeah,
that's the way it was when my kids were in school. Yeah, there was all those problems, and also teachers who really didn't know how they worked.
Oh,
kids who knew more about the computers than the teachers do. It was a bad combo.
No, we would assign like 2 kids to go around and help everybody turn on their computers and get their passwords. And
it was a more innocent time.
It was chaos. Computer time was chaos.
But you got to do it because probably there was research saying it was a good idea.
Right. Well, because probably, parents and school board members are like, these computers are the future. We need to
No, you know what it was? Most of our curriculum was around keyboarding. It wasn't even about using a computer. It was about keyboarding skills.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Did you guys take typing classes back in the day? On those big, heavy typewriters?
Yeah. I got an A+. I was so proud of myself.
I actually learned how to type on a computer. We had, because my dad was into computers pretty early, and we had one, and we had a game that was like, it was basically Space Invaders, but it was for typing.
Yes, right. I remember those.
Had to type the letters to like zap the little spaceships or whatever, and that's how I learned to type. So I never had to take it in school.
Oh, I took it in like 7th or 8th grade. But I did a lot of those games to try to teach my kids how to keyboard, really only my daughter because my son was not interested. But I don't think it really took with her. I think she still had some pecs. And she had a class somewhere along the line, but still. Me, on the other hand, I'm very fast. Like, I could totally transcribe a lecture.
That's right. Well, we're glad that technology has allowed us to bring you this podcast, and we will continue to do that regardless of any research, pro or con. Absolutely. But that'll be it for today's round 1. Tune in tomorrow for our entertainment themed round 2, and later in the week to find out what we're complaining about, obsessing about, and recommending right now. We're always interested in what you have to say, so drop us a comment on our website, our Facebook page, or Twitter, where you'll find us at Roundabout Chat.